They say space hides secrets we're not ready for, but sometimes those secrets find us first. So if you're watching this, brace yourself, because what we're about to uncover might change everything you think you know about 3I Atlas. And before we dive into this mystery, make sure you subscribe, because what's coming next could easily become the biggest revelation of the decade. It started with a clip, grainy, short, almost unremarkable at first glance. A supposed observation feed leaked from an automated deep space telescope, one of several connected through NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory's extended monitoring array. The feed showed 3I Atlas, the interstellar object that's been the subject of relentless fascination since it entered our solar system. But this time, there was something different, something lurking behind it. A silhouette so vast, so structured, that it sent the astronomy community into silent panic. The footage spread across restricted channels almost instantly. A shadow stretching for kilometers, trailing just a few thousand kilometers behind the glowing nucleus of 3I Atlas. Analysts who first saw it at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics initially thought it was an artifact, a lens ghost, or data compression artifact. But then, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii caught the same anomaly from a completely different angle. It wasn't a reflection. It was real. For context, 3I Atlas, the third officially catalogued interstellar object, has been traveling at extraordinary speed, around 68 kilometers per second at perihelion. Its composition has defied classification. It glows green in wavelengths that don't match standard cometary spectra, with emissions peaking where there should be none, a chemical signature devoid of the diatomic carbon typical in comets. The European Southern Observatory even confirmed, through polarization imaging, that its coma had doubled in diameter since August, showing patterns that could only be explained by electromagnetic activity, not gas jets. So when this new object appeared behind it, fixed in synchronization, moving identically, like a tethered companion, the silence from the official institutions said more than words ever could. NASA's public database made no mention. The Hubble spectrograph archives went mysteriously offline for maintenance. Even the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, which had previously released open data on transients, began scrubbing its 3I Atlas tracking logs from public access. But a handful of independent astronomers kept their telescopes trained on the coordinates. One of them, Stephen Burns, a geophysicist who's been tracking 3I Atlas for months, released a breakdown video that lit up the space forums. He slowed the frame down, pixel by pixel. There it was again, a massive geometric form, partially cloaked by plasma interference, drifting in formation behind the object. And that's when the questions began. Was it a fragmented part of 3I Atlas? Could it be a natural companion rock following its gravitational wake? Or was it something else entirely? When the James Webb Space Telescope was repositioned to study the region, its mid-infrared sensors picked up an unusual signature. At first, the team thought it was a calibration error, but the signal was too consistent. Deep in the data stream, beyond the glare of 3I Atlas's coma, was a structured heat source with clear linear geometry, triangular lattice reflections, edges, symmetry, things nature rarely does on her own. NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory didn't publicly acknowledge the find, but internal memos leaked through astronomy servers and later verified by astrophysicists at the University of Cambridge described the detection as non-random, persistent, and unresolved. The phrase non-random was enough to spark chaos. Meanwhile, Arecibo's legacy archives, reprocessed with modern AI algorithms, revealed a faint radio reflection from the same coordinates recorded decades before the telescope's collapse. The data matched almost perfectly with the current position of 3I Atlas. Whatever this was, it had been here before, and this raised a chilling hypothesis. Was this so-called vessel actually escorting 3I Atlas through our system? Let's pause for a moment and think about that. If this is real, it means the universe might be far more interconnected and far more aware than we've ever imagined. Astronomers from the Harvard-Smithsonian Institute recently reanalyzed polarimetric readings of the coma using deep learning filters, and what they discovered could rewrite what we think of as natural motion. The electromagnetic pattern isn't random, it's rhythmic, repeating every 17.8 hours in exact cycles. It behaves like a frequency signal, a kind of pulse that fluctuates with the object's rotation. Yet, this new structure behind 3I Atlas seems to respond to it. In one frame, the vessel's edges pulse brighter as the 17.8-hour cycle peaks, as if the two are communicating. When a probe from the European Space Agency attempted to triangulate the thermal echoes from 3I Atlas and its strange follower, the readings came back inconsistent with any known natural material. The energy distribution matched not rock, not ice, but reflective alloys that absorb and re-emit radiation almost as if engineered. And so began the split in the scientific community. Half called it coincidence, a hoax, pixel compression meeting paranoia. The other half, those who had seen the raw data, refused to speak on record. Yet, here's what made it harder to dismiss. During a short transmission blackout at JPL's Deep Space Network lasting just 4.6 seconds, a faint signal appeared across 3 frequency bands, all originating from the 3I Atlas coordinates. The pulse pattern matched an old Voyager 1 telemetry frequency, but there was no spacecraft there. None. When compared with historic Voyager 1 data from 1980, astrophysicists at Stanford's Ronald Bracewell radio program found a staggering overlap in structure, as though someone or something had replicated Earth's oldest transmission fingerprint and sent it back, modulated. And then, silence. The broadcast stopped. The anomaly faded. 3I Atlas continued its trajectory, but the object behind it, the so-called vessel shifted angle, sliding deeper into the coma's shadow. For 3 consecutive nights, it vanished completely from infrared imaging, and then Webb caught it again. A faint silhouette emerging from plasma fog, glowing with a dim red pulse, just before disappearing beyond the frame. And that brings us to the question haunting every observatory tonight. If this footage is real, what exactly are we looking at? Is it a fragment? An escort craft? A beacon? Or is this an elaborate misdirection, a digital ghost stitched into the data to test our perception of truth? Because if it isn't a hoax, then 3I Atlas isn't just passing through, it's being accompanied. And maybe, just maybe, it's being watched. The footage wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, here it was, frame by frame, pixel by pixel, showing something that shouldn't be there. astronomers across the European Southern Observatory network began dissecting it quietly under embargo. They fed the data through polarimetric models and deep space imaging software designed for exoplanet analysis. What emerged was terrifyingly clear. Behind 3I Atlas, a faint yet deliberate shape, symmetrical, luminous at its edges, rotated with mechanical precision, it wasn't tumbling like a rock. It was rolling steady, balanced, and deliberate, as if maintaining formation. By the time the James Webb Space Telescope was repositioned toward the coordinates, the object had dimmed, almost invisible. But Webb's infrared imaging doesn't see like we do. It captures temperature gradients, heat echoes, and the ghostly trails of particles interacting with solar radiation. And when Webb's team reconstructed the frames, something remarkable appeared. A shadow, shaped like a massive ring, hollow at its core. The emission lines surrounding it were identical to what you'd expect from ion propulsion, a faint whisper of charged particles spiraling off its surface. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory noted that such symmetry in motion was highly inconsistent with cometary debris behavior. The phrase they used was technological characteristics observed pending confirmation. That leaked note alone was enough to send the astronomy community into chaos. Meanwhile, at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, researchers began cross-referencing this footage with archived observations of 3I Atlas from earlier months. What they found was spine-chilling faint ripples in space-time measurements that didn't correspond to the comet itself, but to something trailing it. These ripples weren't gravitational in nature, at least not entirely. They suggested an electromagnetic distortion, almost as if the supposed vessel were bending the interplanetary magnetic field around it, cloaking itself from ordinary sensors. When the data reached the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, the pattern repeated. Every few days, 3I Atlas's spectral brightness dipped in a way that perfectly aligned with a large object passing in front of it. It was eclipsing its own companion, but the eclipses were too precise, too rhythmically timed. Nature doesn't move like that. Dr. Stephen Burns, who had already been cataloguing the polarimetric behavior of 3I Atlas, published a private paper under limited circulation, now circulating in encrypted astronomy forums. His theory was that we might be looking at an escorting anomaly, something traveling in gravitational sync with 3I Atlas, possibly using its trajectory as a disguise. And here's where it gets strange. The European Space Agency's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, picked up faint coronal disturbances each time the object passed within the inner solar system range. The plasma around it rippled, forming shockwave patterns identical to those caused by artificial electromagnetic drives. This wasn't speculation, it was data. Still, skeptics claimed it was all digital manipulation, a coordinated hoax made to go viral. But then the Arecibo legacy data resurfaced, older than any CGI software could have fabricated. Buried in archives from 1998 was a weak radar echo matching the same coordinates long before 3I Atlas was even discovered. So, if the vessel was a hoax, who hoaxed the universe 25 years ago? As the story deepened, the footage gained new layers of verification. At NASA's Deep Space Network in Madrid, a telemetry anomaly showed an artificial signal ping a narrowband pulse consistent with transponder data, lasting only 0.8 seconds. It originated exactly where 3I Atlas was located at the time, and then silence again. The silence itself became the loudest part of the mystery. When Vera Rubin Observatory attempted to publish its high-resolution imaging data from the same region, the file was pulled offline within hours. Data corruption, they called it. But inside the metadata logs, analysts found digital fingerprints of multiple user edits, not errors, edits. Someone had accessed the data manually, and that's where things turned darker. Independent astronomers from the University of Tokyo released a filtered composite image of the area. In it, the vessel appeared faint but unmistakable, a colossal arched silhouette partially hidden behind 3I Atlas's expanding coma. Its geometry matched no known natural formation. It had uniform curvature, segmented panels, and most bizarrely, visible movement. The light reflecting off its surface changed as if controlled, not scattered. The object's surface even emitted infrared radiation at uniform intervals, like beacon pulses. The scientific explanation ran out there. The alternative theories flooded in. Was this a derelict ship? A fragment of an ancient civilization's craft? A relay station hidden in plain sight? Or perhaps an illusion created by 3I Atlas's plasma tail, nature's cruel trick on human imagination? But the deeper experts looked, the more structure they saw. And then the footage changed everything. A second video surfaced, this time from a telescope array in Chile. The camera caught 3I Atlas in motion, and just for a second, the vessel behind it emitted a flare. A blinding burst of blue-white light, directed, controlled, then gone. That light didn't behave like reflected sunlight. It was laser-pure coherent, and coherent light doesn't exist naturally in space. At that moment, even skeptics went quiet. NASA's internal communications, later leaked, revealed the phrase extraterrestrial technological probability, unverified, repeated across multiple reports. But officially, nothing was said. The European Southern Observatory dismissed it as optical interference. Harvard said, further study is required. And the James Webb team quietly shifted its next observation cycle directly onto 3I Atlas's coordinates. The world didn't need official confirmation anymore. The truth was already too big to contain. For days after the second flare was captured, the global scientific community fell into uneasy silence. There were no official statements, no press briefings, just cryptic reports of data under review. But behind closed doors, astronomers and defense agencies were already running simulations, and what they found was terrifyingly precise. The object behind 3I Atlas wasn't just following it, it was maintaining exact velocity and distance down to the decimal. A behavior so stable, it resembled orbital synchronization, something natural bodies almost never do without a gravitational lock. Yet, there was no measurable gravity between the two. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, simulation experts fed the data through Voyager-era algorithms to predict how debris clouds behave under solar influence. The results were clear. No known comet fragment or dust formation could sustain that level of equilibrium. The team's internal memo, later leaked on an astronomy forum, read, "Observed motion inconsistent with natural mechanics, suggestive of active correctional control." In simpler terms, whatever was behind 3I Atlas seemed to be steering itself. Meanwhile, over at the European Southern Observatory in Chile, researchers began refining the frames using deep field polarization analysis. They enhanced the light curves around 3I Atlas's tail, hoping to filter out background stars. What they saw left even the skeptics speechless. Hidden beneath the comet's glowing coma was a faint outline, curved, metallic, almost skeletal in appearance. It wasn't flat or rock-like, but structured. Portions of it reflected polarized light in perfect symmetry, almost like a lattice. One of the scientists described it as looking at the bones of something vast, something built, not born. Within hours, similar data poured in from the Keck Observatory in Hawaii and the Subaru telescope near Mauna Kea. Both instruments, using entirely different imaging systems, detected the same reflection. It wasn't a data glitch. It wasn't interference. It was there. And then a whisper emerged from the Vera Rubin Observatory. Someone inside a Chilean facility leaked an encrypted dataset tagged a TLASB ACKOBJECTCLASSIFIED. When decrypted, it revealed spectrographic traces inconsistent with rock, ice, or metal alloys found in any known comet nucleus. Instead, it showed a layered material capable of scattering ultraviolet radiation while absorbing infrared heat, a hallmark of advanced thermal shielding. The material properties were eerily similar to those used in NASA's own ablative shielding on spacecraft hulls, only magnitudes more efficient. By now, whispers turned into panic. A Harvard-Smithsonian analysis team tried to replicate the readings using software modeling, but every simulation failed unless they added one impossible variable: artificial modulation. The object behind 3I Atlas seemed to adjust its optical reflectivity in real time, as if responding to the intensity of sunlight, something only an active surface, possibly energy regulating, could do. One astronomer reportedly said during the internal briefing, "If this is a natural object, then nature just reinvented engineering." The silence following that comment lasted several days. During that time, NASA's Deep Space Network registered an unusual data interruption just 5.7 seconds long, coinciding exactly with the time 3I Atlas and its mysterious companion crossed behind the sun's corona. When the signal returned, background noise levels were abnormally high. Buried deep in that static was a repeating pulse, low frequency, faint but patterned. It wasn't random. Engineers at JPL's radio division noticed the pulse followed a Fibonacci sequence pattern. Nature loves Fibonacci spirals in living systems, yes, but not in electromagnetic waveforms. The team kept it under wraps, labeling it non-terrestrial interference. But then something stranger happened. As the James Webb Space Telescope continued to observe 3I Atlas from its Lagrange point, the data revealed subtle distortions in the surrounding space, micro-lensing effects suggesting that the vessel behind it was bending light ever so slightly. The conclusion was unavoidable. The object had mass, significant mass, but not enough to account for the lensing effect it created. This implied something extraordinary. Either the object was generating its own localized field, or it was built from material capable of manipulating space-time itself. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, one researcher proposed a daring theory that 3I Atlas's acceleration and the synchronized motion of the vessel could be part of a propulsion technique similar to solar sailing, but on an interstellar scale. The vessel could be using the comet-like object as camouflage, while drawing energy from its ionized plasma trail. But if that was true, one question remained. Why here? Why so close to Earth? Vera Rubin's final observation before the object dipped beyond their visible range provided a haunting clue. For just 3 minutes, the spectrograph picked up a faint echo, a signature reflecting Earth's own radar frequency back into space, delayed by mere seconds. Someone, or something, had just answered. And then both 3I Atlas and the shadow behind it vanished into the darkness beyond our solar horizon. For days, deep space radio antennas from NASA's Canberra complex to Arecibo's surviving sister dishes in Puerto Rico scanned desperately for another signal, but nothing came back. Not a whisper, not a ping, just cold silence. Until, on the 10th day, a brief flare appeared, one that matched the vessel's signature, this time closer than before, much closer. It wasn't moving away anymore. It was turning. And, for the first time in recorded data, the trajectory of 3I Atlas shifted slightly as though it were responding. No one knows what's inside that shadow trailing through the void, but one thing's clear. Something out there is aware of us now. And if this footage was a hoax, it's the most sophisticated deception ever engineered. But if it's real, then what we've just seen isn't the beginning of discovery. It's the beginning of contact. The silence after the flare didn't last long. Within hours, observatories across the globe began reporting new optical disturbances. It was faint, erratic at first, like static in the night sky. But once the data was processed, the pattern was unmistakable. 3I Atlas was emitting a secondary signal, weaker than before, but pulsing in perfect rhythm with something unseen behind it. At the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, engineers fed the frequency data through deep spectrum decoders used to analyze gamma bursts. What they found made no sense. The pulses contained interlaced harmonics that mirrored the natural resonant frequencies of Earth's own magnetosphere. Somehow, the object millions of kilometers away was syncing with our planet's magnetic heartbeat. The European Southern Observatory confirmed the finding using the Very Large Telescope array in Chile. The readings showed a coupling between solar wind particles and a localized magnetic field forming around both 3I Atlas and its trailing shadow. This field wasn't random, it oscillated in geometric intervals, like a grid unfolding in motion. One researcher described it as a magnetic architecture, an engineered storm. By the 5th observation cycle, even the James Webb Space Telescope detected an odd phenomenon: photon reflection off the back object that shouldn't have been visible at all from Webb's position. It was as if the vessel had shifted, tilting one reflective side toward us not accidentally, but purposefully. Then came the strangest part. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, a team comparing time-lapse frames of the object noticed that its light intensity spiked exactly when Earth's auroras did. When geomagnetic storms rippled through our atmosphere, the vessel behind 3I Atlas brightened in perfect unison. The odds of this being coincidence? Nearly zero. It was as if something up there was listening and responding. Stefan Burns, the geophysicist who had been documenting the object for months, released a chilling hypothesis during a closed-door seminar. He suggested the vessel might not be following 3I Atlas at all. It might be the control system guiding it. a relay, a core craft using the comet-like body as camouflage, masking its emissions while it traveled through our solar system. But if that was true, it meant something or someone had engineered a structure larger than some moons, with the capability to manipulate solar plasma and gravitational vectors with surgical precision. At Keck Observatory, infrared mapping revealed yet another anomaly. Faint hexagonal thermal points scattered across the vessel's structure. They weren't random. When plotted, the coordinates formed an almost biological pattern, a honeycomb lattice resembling the energy distribution nodes of a Dyson swarm. The implication was staggering. This wasn't a single ship. It could be part of a network. By now, mainstream outlets caught fragments of the leaks, but NASA remained silent. Their official line, atmospheric reflection artifacts. Yet, internal files, later cited by analysts from the University of Tokyo, used a different term, coordinated emission source. Even the Arecibo legacy data, re-examined by independent astronomers using AI restoration models, revealed that a similar pulse had been faintly detected in 2015 years before 3I Atlas entered our solar system. Meaning, whatever this is, it didn't just arrive, it had been here before. Meanwhile, deep space sensors at the ESA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory started recording low-frequency rumblings, subhertz waves traveling through the solar wind, directed not outward from the Sun, but inward from the location of 3I Atlas. The waves carried harmonics identical to the ones recorded near Earth's poles. Every new piece of data made one thing harder to ignore. The vessel wasn't a companion following a comet. It was a transmitter one, possibly awakening. Still, without visual proof, skeptics pushed back. They claimed light scattering and instrumentation lag could explain everything. But that changed the moment a faint motion blur appeared behind 3I Atlas, not drifting this time, but rotating. Slow, deliberate, mechanical rotation. As the images sharpened, the vessel's surface shimmered not in reflection, but in transformation. Panels of light expanding outward, then retracting again, forming what appeared to be a massive, concentric ring structure. It wasn't moving randomly anymore. It was preparing. The world's most powerful telescopes were now locked on its position. The Hubble spectrograph, revived for deep sky monitoring, recorded an ultraviolet signature so pure it resembled the output of an ionizing reactor, except far stronger. Something colossal was beginning to charge, and for the first time in weeks, the signal patterns stopped mimicking Earth. They began broadcasting outward toward deep space. No one could yet say to whom. As the energy surge continued to rise, the world's major observatories entered emergency coordination mode. Every radio dish from the Deep Space Network to the European Space Operations Center pivoted toward the same coordinates. The object, the supposed vessel, was now fully visible in thermal spectrum. Its outline was massive, dwarfing the comet it trailed. Rotating slowly, like some forgotten machine awakening from centuries of slumber, the vessel began projecting waves of energy that rippled across millions of kilometers of space. The James Webb Space Telescope, stationed at L2, recorded photon flux patterns far beyond what any natural comet interaction could create. Webb's team described it as a structured emission artificial in periodicity. At NASA's Goddard Center, analysts cross-referenced the readings with older data from Voyager 1's telemetry archives. They found faint echoes of the same frequency from 2018, meaning the object's signal wasn't new. It had been transmitting for years, long before 3I Atlas entered our system. The Vera Rubin Observatory detected synchronized flashes, 6 bright pulses spaced evenly apart, like a coded sequence. But these weren't random. The timing between pulses matched the average delay between Earth-based radio bursts and their reflections in the ionosphere. To some, it looked like the object was mirroring our planet's own electromagnetic rhythm, almost as if studying it. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, a theory began to form. What if the vessel wasn't broadcasting, but listening? Using 3I Atlas's ionized tail as a medium, it might be absorbing radio noise from every planet it passed. Our communications, our radar, our satellites, even Wi-Fi bleed would have been collected and analyzed for years without anyone realizing. Dr. Stephen Burns expanded the hypothesis, warning that 3I Atlas could be functioning as a relay node, a carrier transmitting data to another location far beyond our range. If this vessel is not organic, then we're witnessing the handoff of information across light years, he said. And that means someone is on the receiving end. In response, NASA quietly ordered an encrypted observation blackout, redirecting several high-gain antennas toward the anomaly. But independent radio astronomers in Australia broke the silence, releasing live readings that showed something astonishing for the first time. The signal frequency dipped into audible range. The world heard it, a deep, rhythmic tone, almost like a heartbeat buried in static. Across social media, people began referring to it as the Atlas Pulse. Governments denied it was real, but private radio operators confirmed the signal was there, consistent, repeating every 11 minutes. Meanwhile, the European Southern Observatory detected gravitational oscillations near the object. They weren't strong enough to distort nearby orbits, but they were measurable tiny space-time ripples synchronized with each pulse. This meant the vessel wasn't just broadcasting energy, it was bending the very fabric of the void around it. No one could explain how. At Keck Observatory, a new image was processed using adaptive optics. The photo, grainy but unmistakable, revealed what appeared to be multiple protrusions extending from the vessel's hull, long, thin arms stretching hundreds of meters outward, each ending in a luminous node. They weren't random shapes. They looked like antennae. And that's when it hit the scientists watching. This wasn't a ship in transit. It was a station. Something had been built there, anchored in the shadow of 3I Atlas, silently observing us, syncing with our planet's signals, and now beginning to respond. But respond to what? That's what terrified everyone the most. Because as the pulses grew stronger, Earth's ionospheric data began showing identical mirror spikes, faint copies of the same frequency pattern, now echoing from our own atmosphere. Something above us had started to hum back. Within just 24 hours of the signal humming back, global communications began to falter in ways no system engineer could explain. It wasn't a blackout, it was a distortion. Satellite relays from SpaceX's Starlink, OneWeb, and even military-grade communications networks started experiencing synchronized interference, all oscillating on the exact same 11-minute interval as the Atlas pulse. At first, experts thought it was solar activity. The NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center detected no unusual flares, no coronal mass ejections, no radiation spikes. Yet, the disruptions continued. GPS readings wavered, timestamps desynchronized, and orbital telemetry began to flicker off by milliseconds. It was subtle, too subtle to cause panic. But for scientists watching the data streams, it was chilling, because those tiny discrepancies weren't random. They aligned perfectly with the vessel's signal. The European Space Agency's solar orbiter, positioned between Earth and the Sun, captured electromagnetic fluctuations threading through the solar wind as if invisible cords were linking our planet and 3I Atlas in a shimmering web. At the same time, the James Webb Space Telescope recorded faint changes in the object's light signature. The reflective surfaces seemed to contract and expand as though the vessel was breathing. Each expansion corresponded with Earth's response pulse, suggesting a feedback loop, almost like communication between two biological systems. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics was the first to propose the unthinkable. The vessel wasn't just transmitting, it was synchronizing. The phrase electromagnetic symbiosis began appearing in their classified reports. Meanwhile, the Vera Rubin Observatory's long-exposure images revealed something no one could explain: faint threads of luminescent plasma extending from 3I Atlas's tail, pointing toward Earth. These weren't normal dust streams or ion trails. They moved erratically, like strands of static lightning frozen in motion. Then came the night the sky changed. Amateur astronomers from multiple continents reported seeing a ripple across the stars, a distortion, as if the fabric of the night shimmered for just a moment. It was visible to the naked eye, but lasted less than a second. Yet every major telescope captured it. The European Southern Observatory analyzed the data and concluded that the distortion originated not from space, but from Earth's upper ionosphere, specifically from the exact coordinates aligned with the incoming Atlas signal. Something in orbit had begun amplifying the pulse, and for the first time, a secondary reflection was detected, this one from low Earth orbit. Dozens of dormant satellites, decommissioned decades ago, suddenly reactivated for brief moments, pinging back data packets no one had authorized. The timestamps showed perfect synchronization with the vessel's pulse. It was as though something out there was reaching into our infrastructure, testing how we respond, what we transmit, what we defend. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, engineers working on the Deep Space Network attempted to jam the signal for analysis. They transmitted controlled pulses to counter the interference. But instead of neutralizing the pattern, the vessel's signal adjusted in real time, mirroring the change, adapting faster than any known algorithm could. That was when Dr. Elena Karch, a systems theorist at Caltech, uttered a sentence that sent chills through every listening scientist. Whatever is behind 3I Atlas is not just reacting, it's learning. Still, most agencies stayed silent publicly. Only a handful of astronomers dared speak out online, claiming that the vessel had shifted position again, slightly closing its trajectory toward Earth by a fraction of an arc-second. The movement was tiny millions of kilometers in cosmic terms, but intentional. And as the shift stabilized, James Webb caught something it wasn't supposed to. a new pattern emerging within the vessel's reflected light, not random geometry, but what looked like a structured array of glowing nodes, forming a spiral that mimicked the layout of our solar system. Except the final glowing point wasn't where the sun should be. It was where Earth is. And deep within the static, the Atlas pulse changed tone, lower, slower, and unmistakably rhythmic, almost like a signal forming syllables. Whatever was out there was no longer just observing, it was addressing us. The tone of the signal deepened again that following week. It wasn't just noise anymore, it carried structure, layers. At the European Southern Observatory, spectral analysts decomposed the signal into its frequency components, and what they found was shocking. Beneath the main wave were subharmonic tones repeating in triplets, mathematical ratios identical to those used in quantum encryption systems. It wasn't random static, it was encoded information. But encoded by what? Meanwhile, strange atmospheric readings began surfacing across multiple continents. In northern Canada, auroras flared at latitudes far too low, painting the skies over Toronto and Chicago in pale blue and red curtains. Over Siberia, the night sky shimmered with faint geometric outlines, hexagonal formations drifting within the aurora, almost like symbols drawn in light. Every time these shapes appeared, the Atlas pulse spiked. The Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile captured a faint streak of plasma drifting down toward the Earth's magnetosphere, a thin, luminous thread connecting our upper atmosphere to the region where 3I Atlas was moving. The phenomenon lasted less than 3 minutes, but its electromagnetic strength was off the charts. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory quickly retasked the Deep Space Network antennas to study the event. The data returned was enough to make senior analysts go silent for minutes. The pulse frequency emitted from 3I Atlas had matched the exact oscillation rate of the plasma streak. It wasn't just influencing our atmosphere, it was syncing with it. On the other side of the world, at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, infrared sensors caught flickering patterns on the vessel's hull. The light wasn't stable, it fluctuated as if symbols or runes were appearing and dissolving in quick succession. When processed frame by frame, the shapes resembled orbital paths, spirals, and repeating waveforms like the mathematical fingerprints of solar systems. Dr. Marissa Ho from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics proposed that the vessel might be attempting to translate environmental data into a communicable form. If it's truly artificial, she said, then what we're seeing isn't language in the human sense, but calibration. It's mapping us, literally teaching itself how to talk. For weeks, this process continued in eerie silence. Every night, telescopes across the globe captured the same flickering, the same low hum echoing faintly in radio receivers. But then, something new began to happen. In early observations from the Arecibo Legacy Data Vault, old signals recovered from when the telescope was still active, analysts discovered a strange echo pattern buried in 2019 transmissions. The pattern matched exactly with the current Atlas pulse. This meant the signal had been here before, bouncing off Earth years prior, unnoticed. If that's true, then 3I Atlas wasn't a visitor, it was a returning object. In response, NASA, ESA, and the Chinese National Space Administration quietly formed a shared data task force. Unofficially named Project Helios, its job was to decode whatever was hidden inside the pulse. For the first time in history, rival nations were united not out of diplomacy but fear. As part of the study, Stanford's radio astronomy group resurrected Ronald Bracewell's old concept of interstellar messaging using magnetic resonance to interpret alien transmission. When they applied it to the pulse, a faint lattice pattern emerged in the spectrograms. It wasn't language, but geometry recursive spirals that expanded and folded back into themselves, like a mathematical breathing pattern. And in the very center of the structure, a bright frequency spike matched the electromagnetic resonance of Earth's core. It wasn't calling out to our satellites anymore. It was calling something beneath us. Beneath the Earth's surface, something subtle had begun to stir. Magnetic observatories across the globe, from Canada's Ottawa Geomagnetic Lab to the Kiruna Station in Sweden, detected faint oscillations echoing deep within the planet's crust, not seismic, not tectonic, but rhythmic, almost like an internal heartbeat, synchronized with the Atlas pulse. At first, it seemed impossible. The Earth's magnetic field shifts constantly. It hums with solar winds, planetary rotation, and core convection. But this was different. The oscillations weren't random. They mirrored the precise timing of the vessel's transmissions. 11 minutes on, 11 minutes off. At the Stanford Magnetic Resonance Facility, Dr. Karch and her team began correlating the signal data with old seismic resonance maps. What they found shook them to the core. The pulse frequencies were resonating exactly at the same natural harmonics as Earth's core lattice frequencies. In simpler terms, the vessel wasn't just calling Earth. It was tuning it. To confirm, data from the European Space Agency's swarm satellites, designed to study the planet's magnetic field, revealed subtle but measurable distortions forming geometric alignments around the poles. The flux patterns weren't chaotic, they were organized, like hexagonal fields weaving through the magnetosphere. NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center compared the phenomenon to auroral breathing, but others disagreed. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics published an internal memo suggesting that something external was coordinating these changes, possibly modulating the field to create a resonance bridge between the vessel and Earth's magnetic layers. By now, whispers within scientific circles started referring to it as the Atlas Bridge. Meanwhile, deep underground, at the SNO plus Neutrino Observatory in Ontario, detectors picked up faint electromagnetic interference, not from above, but from below. A rhythmic pattern in sync with the Atlas pulse, as if the signal had penetrated through the crust and was reflecting back from the mantle. That discovery made everyone uneasy, because it meant that whatever was behind 3I Atlas had found a way to reach through space and into the very skeleton of our planet. The Keck Observatory soon released new near-infrared imagery of the vessel. The massive object was now visibly shedding plasma, long, glowing filaments stretching toward the sun, forming a faint bridge of ionized material that extended across millions of kilometers. The shape was eerily biological, like a neural network forming connections. Vera Rubin's wide-field survey cameras captured the glow faintly visible from Earth's upper atmosphere during certain hours. At those moments, sensitive instruments recorded strange EM emissions around ancient geological sites, stone structures, and magnetic anomalies lighting up faintly in the radio spectrum. Sites like the Great Pyramids, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, they all resonated at the same frequency as the Atlas pulse. The pattern was undeniable. It was as though the planet itself, or something beneath it, was responding. In a late-night interview, Dr. Stephen Burns speculated on what many were too afraid to say aloud. What if these sites weren't just monuments? What if they were nodes, ancient instruments built to respond to something that comes every few thousand years? The media dismissed him as dramatic. But inside classified observatory meetings, even NASA scientists began to question the timeline. How long had 3I Atlas, or things like it, been visiting us? Hubble's spectrographic records were re-examined, and to their astonishment, faint traces of similar spectral signatures appeared in data from 1987, 38 years before Atlas was ever spotted. Whatever this was, it wasn't new. It was recurring, and for the first time, humanity faced a terrifying possibility. This vessel wasn't approaching Earth for the first time. It might be returning to complete something it started long ago. By late November, the mystery had moved from the skies to the deepest parts of our planet. Oceanographic sensors, the kind used by NOAA and Japan's JAMSTEC for earthquake and pressure monitoring, began picking up something new. Low-frequency vibrations pulsing from the ocean floor, in perfect rhythm with the 3I Atlas signal. At first, scientists thought it was a coincidence, perhaps volcanic tremors or deep-sea tectonic stress. But when the signal persisted in every ocean basin, from the Pacific to the Arctic, synchronized down to the millisecond, coincidence was no longer an option. In the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, autonomous research drones from the Schmidt Ocean Institute recorded bursts of bioluminescence, massive, circular glows that appeared and vanished in rhythmic harmony with the Atlas pulse. Some glows were over 1 kilometer wide. No known marine species could produce that much light. At the same time, hydrophones, underwater microphones used to track whale migrations, captured strange infrasound. It wasn't whale song, it wasn't geological, it was structured. Repeating tones, layered, rising in pitch, then dropping suddenly, almost as if something beneath the ocean was mimicking the Atlas pulse and replying. NASA's Goddard Oceanic Data Team plotted the frequency patterns and found a chilling symmetry. The delay between Atlas's transmission and the ocean's reply matched the time it would take a signal to travel from Earth's surface to the outer core and back again. It meant that whatever was vibrating down there wasn't just reacting, it was transmitting. By now, the hypothesis had split the scientific community in two. One side believed 3I Atlas was emitting an electromagnetic resonance that triggered deep Earth harmonics. The other side, smaller but growing, argued that the vibrations weren't being caused by the vessel, they were being answered by something inside the Earth. The European Southern Observatory and Harvard's Department of Planetary Sciences began re-examining ancient magnetic anomaly maps, some dating back to early Soviet data archives. To their shock, the strongest resonance points aligned with tectonic cold spots, regions of the mantle unusually dense and conductive. Areas like beneath the South Pacific, under Antarctica, and below the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. If those were natural geological nodes, they were now behaving like antennas. Then came the footage. An undersea probe launched by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in the North Atlantic returned with a frame-by-frame anomaly, an enormous, faintly glowing structure embedded in the ocean floor, hexagonal in shape, about 3 kilometers wide and reflecting light in pulses identical to the Atlas rhythm. At first, The team thought it was an image artifact. But when they filtered the data, the structure remained clear, symmetrical, metallic. The public never saw the raw footage. But fragments leaked. Blurred images showed what appeared to be colossal plates, like scales overlapping one another, with faint blue veins of light flowing through them. Experts were divided. Some called it pareidolia, a trick of light on rock formations. Others whispered a more terrifying theory, that this was part of a buried mechanism, ancient or alien, now waking in response to the vessel. At the same time, a strange optical phenomenon began to appear above those same oceanic regions. Commercial pilots reported shimmering disks of light forming high in the atmosphere, like auroras shaped into perfect circles. The lights would flash once, then disappear. When tracked through multiple satellites, those circular glows aligned precisely over the oceanic nodes, now resonating with Atlas. James Webb recorded a faint infrared connection between the vessel and those coordinates, thin, luminous filaments stretching invisibly across millions of kilometers. The conclusion was terrifyingly clear. Something beneath Earth was linking itself with something beyond it. And whatever Atlas truly was, it had finally succeeded in establishing a bridge. Governments began to act before the public could even grasp the scope of what was happening. One by one, live feeds from the European Southern Observatory, Keck, and even NASA's open Skyview portals went dark. Data streams that had been public for decades suddenly redirected to private servers under temporary calibration lockdowns. It was clear to the scientific community something massive had been discovered, and the world's top agencies were closing ranks. Inside those sealed observatory archives, encrypted transmissions were now circulating between the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the Chinese Deep Space Network, and ESA's Signal Analysis Center in Darmstadt. According to leaked internal memos obtained by independent astronomers, all of them were monitoring the same anomaly, a transmission sequence repeating from the direction of 3I Atlas, bouncing between it and Earth. But what was shocking wasn't the signal itself, it was the timing. The signal wasn't being transmitted from 3I Atlas, it was being relayed through it, like a mirror, reflecting a message that didn't originate in interstellar space, but from somewhere inside Earth. NASA's archived telemetry data from Voyager 1 and 2, still transmitting from the edge of interstellar space, began showing residual distortions that matched the frequency of the Atlas pulse. That shouldn't have been possible. Voyager's systems aren't designed to receive data from Earth, yet the probes had started recording background fluctuations that seemed to echo the same repeating numeric patterns: 6, 11, 19, 6, 11, 19. The same pattern detected earlier in deep ocean vibrations. Within 72 hours of that finding, a document surfaced on a dark web astronomy forum allegedly leaked from ESA's Helios division. It contained frame captures from the James Webb Space Telescope's latest infrared imaging session. In those frames, 3I Atlas appeared not as a single object, but as two: a large, irregular body, the vessel itself, and a smaller, perfectly spherical core hidden behind it, glowing faintly red. Astrophysicists initially dismissed the leak, until, that is, an independent researcher from the University of Tokyo's sub-millimeter observatory cross-referenced the leaked image with Webb's public observation logs. The timestamps matched perfectly. If the data was real, it meant Webb had captured something extraordinary, an enormous semi-transparent structure drifting behind 3I Atlas, a shape the size of a small moon, its outer shell flickering like liquid glass. Some began calling it the shadow core. In private communications, scientists from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics suggested a radical theory that the core was a kind of power source or relay station designed to amplify signals through gravitational resonance. If true, it wasn't merely behind 3I Atlas, it was controlling it. Simultaneously, multiple ground-based telescopes across the world detected strange optical distortions, faint ripples in starlight whenever the vessel passed near them. Light seemed to bend and shimmer unnaturally, as though space itself were warping around the object. The European Space Agency confirmed in a restricted report that gravitational lensing patterns around Atlas didn't align with its visible mass. Simply put, it was too light for how much gravity it was generating, meaning there was something invisible around it, something massive. The next revelation came from Stanford's Radio Astronomy Lab. Using algorithms based on Ronald Bracewell's communication theory, they decoded a portion of the repeating numeric signal. When the data was transformed into spectrogram imagery, it revealed something terrifyingly familiar, a near-perfect outline of Earth's magnetic field. But there was a distortion, a second outline overlapping it, like another magnetic sphere surrounding the planet. The interpretation was chilling. The vessel was mapping Earth's electromagnetic body, and the overlap suggested that a second artificial magnetic layer was beginning to form around the planet. This wasn't just observation anymore. It was construction. And as one researcher at the European Space Operations Center allegedly said before all communications went dark, if it finishes building whatever it's building, we won't be looking out into space anymore. Space will be looking in. Within days, the world began to flicker. Not metaphorically, literally. Power grids across major continents started to experience short, synchronized blackouts that lasted exactly 11 minutes and 11 seconds, the same interval as the original Atlas pulse. At first, officials blamed solar storms. But when satellites in geostationary orbit, including weather and military communication platforms, also began dropping offline in sequence, experts at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory realized something impossible. The failures weren't random. They were patterned. Every satellite that lost contact was positioned along a precise geometric arc that traced a faint circular path around the planet, the same invisible structure Stanford's team had described earlier. An artificial magnetic layer forming around Earth. In orbit, the SpaceX Starlink constellation recorded a faint blue halo that cameras couldn't capture directly but could sense as interference. It surrounded the entire planet like an energy net, transparent, ghostly, and pulsing. ESA's solar orbiter confirmed it next. A new electromagnetic field had emerged around Earth, not generated by human technology or the Sun, but by the interaction between our natural magnetosphere and the 3I Atlas signal. And it was growing stronger. Inside the International Space Station, astronauts reported strange static flashes on their visors during night cycles, sparks of red and blue light that danced briefly in their peripheral vision, as if space itself were flickering. Cameras on board captured faint trails moving in the darkness, shimmering lines that looked like threads weaving around the station, bending light as they passed. Dr. Elena Mirev, a Russian physicist aboard the ISS, described one of those events in a recorded transmission. "It's not lightning. It moves with intent. It wraps around us. It feels alive." Her signal cut out mid-sentence. When NASA replayed the archived feed, spectrogram analysis revealed hidden frequencies embedded in the audio, the same rhythmic sequence seen in the Atlas pulse and the Earth core vibrations. As the pattern expanded, ground stations on Earth began noticing anomalies in the ionosphere, circular ripples of plasma forming and collapsing faster than any known natural process. During these events, long-range radio frequencies would bounce erratically, and compasses would spin uncontrollably for exactly 11 seconds before stabilizing. Then came the visual proof. The James Webb Telescope, aimed once again at Atlas for a secondary deep-field observation, detected something extraordinary, a faint, lattice-like pattern stretching across the void, a glowing web connecting Atlas, Earth, and several points far beyond the solar system. Each filament pulsed with faint radio signatures, some carrying complex harmonic frequencies that no known natural phenomenon could produce. Harvard astrophysicist Dr. Amir Tanaka compared the readings with Arecibo's archived SETI data and found partial matches, fragments of sequences humanity had once dismissed as cosmic noise. But now, those same noises formed perfect alignment with the Atlas web. This wasn't random. It was architecture. The idea spread like wildfire across observatory circles. What if the vessel wasn't alien in the traditional sense, not a ship, but a relay station, part of an ancient network spanning galaxies, waiting for activation from worlds capable of producing electromagnetic resonance? As if Earth had finally spoken the right frequency. By the time governments realized the field was affecting satellite communications, it was too late. Every attempt to shut down orbital systems resulted in cascading failures, as if the network itself refused to be interrupted. And as the days passed, an eerie sight appeared in the night sky. A faint circular shimmer like a second moon, barely visible, hovering near the path of 3I Atlas. But this wasn't reflection or lens flare. The Keck Observatory confirmed it was a massive, translucent structure tens of thousands of kilometers wide, slowly rotating, its edges glowing with soft red arcs of plasma. The data was undeniable. There was something behind Atlas, and it was now awake. The sky had become alive. All over the world, people stepped outside to see it, curtains of red, green, and electric blue light rolling across the night like slow waves. The auroras stretched far beyond the poles now, shimmering even over deserts, tropical oceans, and cities bathed in electricity. But this wasn't beauty anymore. This was communication. For the first time, the auroras spoke. Infrasound detectors, weather radars, even simple AM radios began picking up the same signal. Deep, rhythmic pulses, structured, deliberate, intelligent. When translated into spectrographs, the pattern revealed something horrifyingly organized. It was a map, a three-dimensional model of Earth surrounded by a halo, with a single bright node hovering just beyond the orbit of the Moon. That node matched perfectly with the coordinates of 3I Atlas. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, Dr. Lena Chowdhury, who had spent months decoding the Atlas signal, realized what she was looking at. The auroras were not random, they were data packets. The planet's atmosphere had become a transmitter, and Earth was now broadcasting back. Every lightning strike, every static pulse, every shimmer in the sky was part of the network. The planet was now a node. And then, at 3:11 UTC, every telescope, ground-based and orbital, recorded the same impossible moment. The region behind 3I Atlas began to unfold. It started as a faint distortion, like a mirage in space. Then, lines of energy formed, outlining something vast, something architectural. A circular frame, metallic and incomprehensibly large, emerged behind the object. It rotated slowly, each segment glowing like a city seen from orbit. The Keck Observatory in Hawaii estimated its size, over 40,000 kilometers wide. This wasn't a ship, it was a gate. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory confirmed it seconds later. Gravitational readings from the Deep Space Network spiked beyond measurable scale. Space-time around the structure had begun to bend inward, forming a funnel-shaped distortion extending toward the solar system's edge. It wasn't entering, it was opening. The James Webb Telescope, locked on its coordinates, captured the final frames before its sensors overloaded columns of light extending through the void, twisting, alive, as though woven by invisible hands. Inside that vortex, spectrographic analysis detected chemical traces: hydrogen, oxygen, methane, the building blocks of atmosphere. The vessel was pulling matter from space itself, reshaping it, building something new. Then came the sound. Across the globe, deep in the ionosphere, a subsonic vibration began to hum through the air, too low for human ears, but powerful enough to shake skyscraper glass. Animals reacted first. Birds fled inland in panic. Whales surfaced and beached themselves en masse, emitting frantic calls. And then came the light, not from the sun, but from space. A brilliant white beam struck the Pacific Ocean, visible from orbit, its diameter stretching hundreds of kilometers. It wasn't a weapon, it was scanning. The beam passed over the ocean, the continents, and finally lingered on the Arctic, where it remained fixed for exactly 11 minutes and 11 seconds. When it stopped, seismic stations worldwide reported a deep, harmonic tremor, one that resonated with the Earth's own Schumann frequency. It was as if the planet had responded. Then, silence. The gate dimmed. The auroras faded. 3I Atlas began to drift away, its faint glow shrinking into the distance. And for a moment, the world exhaled. But just before it vanished beyond the sun's glare, the James Webb Telescope, reactivated on backup systems, caught one last transmission, a narrowband radio pulse from the departing vessel. When decoded, it wasn't numbers this time. It was a waveform, faint but unmistakable, a human voice distorted beyond recognition, repeating in multiple languages, "Is greater than phase 1 complete. Await transmission." Then static. The stars returned to silence. But deep beneath the Pacific, in one of the oceanic resonance nodes first discovered months before, something began to pulse. Slowly, patiently, in the same rhythm as the Atlas signal. And as Dr. Chowdhury wrote in her final entry, before the feed was locked by NASA is greater than if that wasn't the beginning of contact, then it was the test before it.